Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are tackling a really specific and surprisingly common risk that could leave your business seriously exposed. It's a critical gap in your insurance that, honestly, you might not even know exists. So, let me just start by asking this. Does your work ever take you or your team near the water? I mean, you could be a contractor, an electrician, maybe even a painter. And how you answer that simple question could have huge financial implications because the rules completely change the moment your work touches the water's edge. And this right here, this is probably one of the most dangerous assumptions a business owner can make. Believing your standard state workers' comp policy has you covered is a huge mistake. A single accident, just one slip-up on a pier or a dock, can suddenly reveal massive, potentially bankrupting gaps in your coverage. Okay, so let's really dive into this. To wrap our heads around it, we first need to get the fundamental difference between your standard, everyday state policy and a totally separate one that's actually mandated by the federal government. Now, this is the coverage we're all pretty familiar with, right? It's required by state law, and it's built specifically for work that happens on land. An injury at a normal construction site, in an office, this is the policy that handles it. Simple enough. But the second your work touches what the law calls navigable waters, everything changes. You step right out of the state's jurisdiction and boom, you're in the world of federal law. And that law is called the United States Longshore and Harbor Workers' Compensation Act, or what pretty much everyone just calls USL&H. And this is where you can really see just how different these two things are. Your state act, that's state law. But the Longshore Act, USL&H, that comes straight from the U.S. Congress. The benefits for workers are generally way higher under USL&H. It covers a totally different class of maritime workers. And yeah, because of all that, it definitely costs more to insure. They're two completely separate systems. Right, so the million-dollar question is, how in the world do you know if this federal law even applies to your business? Well, thankfully, it boils down to a pretty simple but very strict two-part test. So first up is what's called the situs test, and that's all about location, plain and simple. Where is the work happening? Is it on, over, or even right next to navigable water? We're talking docks, piers, shipyards, terminals. Then part two is the status test. This one's about what the job actually is. Does the work involve maritime stuff like construction, ship repair, or loading cargo? Now here's the key. If your employee's work meets both of these tests, even if it's just for a temporary project, you almost certainly need to have USL&H coverage. And this case is a perfect real-world example. You have a carpenter, not a traditional longshoreman, who gets injured while building a pier. Well, because the work happened over navigable water, it triggered USL&H. A standard workers' comp policy would have almost certainly denied that claim, leaving the employer completely on the hook for everything. But hold on, because USL&H doesn't actually cover everyone near the water. What about the crew who are working on the vessel itself? Well, that's where another crucial layer of protection comes into play. And that layer is called Marine Employers' Liability, or MEL. This insurance is specifically designed to protect you against claims from employees who are legally considered seamen, think captains, mates, crew members, under other federal maritime laws like the Jones Act. So this is for injuries that happen aboard a vessel. Okay, if you only remember one thing from this whole explainer, please make it this slide. Look at how cleanly this breaks it all down. You've got your standard workers' comp for land-based employees, you've got USL&H, which is federally required for dock and harbor workers, and then you've got MEL for the crew actually on a vessel. 3 different groups, 3 different places, and 3 different policies. You see why getting this wrong is just not an option. And I say it's not an option because failing to get the right federal coverage, well, that's not just a business risk. It comes with some really severe, legally mandated penalties. For starters, the federal government can hit you with a fine of up to $10,000, and that's per violation, just for not having the right USL&H coverage in place. But it gets a whole lot worse. It's not just about money. The penalties can actually include up to a full year in prison. I mean, this is incredibly serious stuff. And the liability here, wow, it runs deep. It can actually pierce the corporate veil, which means corporate officers can be held personally responsible. And hey, general contractors, listen up. If you hire a sub who doesn't have the right coverage for a job near the water, you could be the one held liable for their injured employees. It creates this whole chain of risk that you really can't afford. So at this point, you might be wondering, okay, if this is all so important, how come it's not more common knowledge? And that's a fair question. The simple answer is that this is a very specialized and, frankly, often very challenging type of coverage to get. Most insurance carriers see this as a really high-risk area. It's a federal law, the benefits are higher, and a lot of them just won't touch it. So you can't just call up any agent. In fact, a lot of state insurance funds don't even offer it. You almost always need a specialist who can help you find a separate, standalone policy from a carrier that's actually approved to write it. So, as we wrap this all up, the one question to really ask yourself is this. Before you bid on that next project, before your crew even steps foot on that pier, are you absolutely positive you don't have this dangerous gap in your insurance? Please, don't wait for a claim to find out the hard way. Take a look at your operations, talk to an expert, and make sure your business is truly protected.